Hello and welcome. This is James from the DSO Imager channel. Tonight I'm going to show the processing workflow I used for this latest shot of M33, the Triangulum galaxy. Now what I did with this shot is a little bit unusual in that I not only got HA plus the LRGB, but I also collected O3 data. And the challenge with this one was to get the HA and the O3 data blended correctly. I did spend a lot of time on this target. Let me pull the integration information here. I've already got the finished picture up on AstroBin, but here you can see, so 66 hours of total integration time. A lot of that was in the narrowband, about 14 hours of HA and 15 hours of O3. A good chunk of that HA data was captured while the moon was pretty bright. And then 16 hours of luminance and then 6 to 7 hours of RGB each. Now, because there's a lot of pieces moving around with this image, I'm not going to go through the typical workflow once I get to the curves part. I'm going to focus mostly on how I put this data together and some of the challenges that I ran with it. So real quick, we'll take a look at, there's our red, and the green, and the blue. And let's look at the HA and O3, and you'll understand why I wanted to collect data on both. Alright, so here's the HA data. We can zoom in and take a look. Now what's interesting is that some of the nebula in here, like this one in particular, has actually a lot of O3 in it. But if you just do an HA LRGB image, you won't get any of the O3, and this nebula will look pink when it really should be a bit more blue. And some of these other nebula, like this one in particular, it's interesting, yet not surprising, but a lot of the nebula are similar to the nebula in our own galaxy, in that it's pretty common to see like the O3 in the center, and the outer edges have more of that HA, and I noticed that once I put this data together. And this one's really, really bright. I had trouble with this one because it was so, it's barely, look, you can even see it with no stretch at all. Alright, let's look at the O3. Oops. Yeah, so I mean it doesn't look like there's as much, and that's normal, you would expect that, but look how bright this one is in O3. And remember that other one that I was pointing out, that I said that kind of the center of it, you can see where the O3 is brighter in certain parts. So my goal with this image was to try to get a deep image of M33 showing all of the stars in this galaxy, and trying to get a more interesting look at the nebula. Give that nebula some more color than just the pink that you typically see. Now the method that I used for combining the narrowband data with the broadband data is this method right here. You know, this method, it doesn't really even have a name. I wish I could just call it something better than this. But anyway, it's a really good method. It's a little challenging, but it's a good one, and I've been using this method for a long time now, mostly adding HA to galaxies. I had to tweak things a little bit to get the HA with the O3. But I did do a video specifically on this process. So if you're interested, definitely give a look at this article here. It talks you through the whole process. And then if you'd like to watch a detailed video on doing this, here it is, Boosting Your Astrophotography with HA. Look, I posted this, a couple years ago. So this one will take you through the whole process, but this is the method that I used, and we'll kind of briefly go over that. Now, the basic strategy for it is that it subtracts the HA data from the red channel and then you add it to a combined RGB image, and it creates a new image with the HA regions in there. So I had to do this also with green and red, excuse me, green and blue, for the O3. So let's see. First, I ran dynamic background extraction against all the channels. You can see them here. Here's the luminance. Here's the RGB. Alright, so this right here, this is just a channel combination of the red, green, and blue. And let's see. Now, I did remove the stars, obviously, and I also used Clone Stamp to clean up a lot of the blemishes that are in there. You can actually see a hint of the Clone Stamp here. So these are the artifacts left behind after removing the stars from the really bright stars. In fact, let me just show you really quick. Yeah, so this is what the color looks like. I mean, that's pretty good right there. Not processed. This was just LRGB combination, and then I believe Blur Exterminator was applied to this. So it's like I could just auto stretch this and release it. Give you an idea of how good the nebula are already shown up. See, there's that one nebula I was talking about before, right? So in straight broadband, it is a blue nebula. And if you look at a lot of HA LRGB images out there, it shows up as a red. And that other one, ooh, I think that's it right there. You can barely see it, yeah, in the broadband. Right, and that's the whole reason we want to add narrowband data, is to make these nebulas stand out. Let's see. Yeah, alright, so this was one application of Blur Exterminator. I did a second application of Blur Exterminator just to see if I can get more detail out of there. You can run Blur Exterminator as an iterative process and do multiple runs, but you do have to be careful because it can start to overcook things. Now, one of the problems I was running into with this target is that it's most noticeable in the luminance channel, but Blur Exterminator was starting to attempt to run deconvolution on some of the background stuff, and that gives you kind of a mottled look. It's really noticeable in the luminance. Yeah, you see this pattern here. I don't know if it's, yeah. So you can see this is before Blur Exterminator, and that's after Blur Exterminator. You can see this like I called it an orange peel effect. It's also, people call it like a worm effect. And so it's trying to deconvolve this, and you're ending up with some really unpleasant looking artifacts. Now the thing is, this is a deconvolution thing. I have a video I posted also probably a couple years ago on how to manually run deconvolution. Right, deconvolution. So before Blur Exterminator, we used to do this the old-fashioned way. We'd have to generate a PSF image and run it this way, and it was a time-consuming process, and if you overdid it, you ended up with the same artifacts. So it's not something that you run into with most targets on Blur Exterminator, but or with deconvolution, but M33 is tricky because you're picking up so many stars. I mean, these are all stars that are in a different galaxy. It's one of only a couple that we can actually resolve the stars, well, the star points, right? Not the actual stars, but their light points in galaxies. The galaxies are further away. We just see the glow of the light coming from the stars, but we can't actually see the stars themselves. So it is that was one of the main challenges I had. I'll go into more about how I worked around this, but let's move on with the narrowband, adding the narrowband data. Alright, so anyway, there's our RGB data that's prepped and ready for the narrowband data. I then ran DBE against the HA, and then ran Blur Exterminator on that HA data. And obviously remove the stars. So now we're getting some wonderful structure here. It is really cool to see this, all these nebula from a different galaxy in this kind of detail. This one over here kind of reminds me of the Heart Nebula. And this one, I think this one might be my favorite one. I didn't look up the designation on it, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Orion. Let's look at it in O3. So here, O3 with DBE, stars removed, and Blur Exterminator applied, right? A lot less than, a lot less crunchy than the HA did, but you expect that, because when you shoot narrowband within our own galaxy, it's kind of the same deal. But yeah, definitely some O3 structure. Look at that. And because I couldn't resist, there was no reason to do this other than just to check out an HOO combination. When adding this data to the broadband data, I did not add the HOO. I had to add the HA to the red channel and the O3 and to the green and blue channels separately. But just to get a good idea. So this is a combination, and this is with Noise Exterminator applied to it. Not processed. I've thought about maybe processing this to really get what I can out of it. But yeah, look at this nebula here. Right? So it's just like what we see in our own galaxy with the O3 signal kind of in the center. And I think, what is this? Is this is a link stretch, right? I can unlink it. Oops. Not too much difference between linked and unlinked, other than the background. But yeah, remember this one that I talked about now? Look how strong it is in the O3 signal. So all those HA LRGB shots that you see of M33 out there, where this particular nebula is red, it's missing, it's the wrong color really. It's missing a lot of information. Right, how about this one that I thought looked kind of like the Heart Nebula? Right, I mean, same kind of deal. We got the O3 in the center. So this is really cool. And this right here, just doing this right here, looking over this data that I've captured, this is part of what astrophotography is about, right? It's capturing this data and then looking at it. So this is just kind of like a truck stop on the along the way to the journey of finishing this image. Is just taking a look at this. All right, so let me show you how we prepare the HA data and the O3 data to be blended with the broadband data. I think this is the right formula here, right? Yes. So this is what you're doing: is you're taking your HA data. There's a have trouble pronouncing that word. We'll call it a variable, right? And there's a symbol. So this Q is a variable that you have to adjust. And then this red C, this is the actual red red data. That's just a regular red data, subtracting the median and then multiplying it by the red again. And so this is basically isolating the HA data from the red data, and the output, we're going to call it HA clean, and it's a kind of a trial by error, right? You're changing this value until you find a value that works well and gives you what you're looking for. So this is the first attempt. And so you can see that all this background information is not going to be used at all when you combine the pictures, and it's just isolating all of this. Let me pull that HA data. So you can see how we have like this kind of extra glow, right? Because the light coming from the galaxy is a broadband light. So it's obvious that some of the light coming from the galaxy is going to make it through the, in this case, 5 nanometer HA filter that isn't the HA data that we're wanting. And so this formula here isolates the stuff that we do want from kind of this background broadband color. And this is what we end up with. Now this setting might have been too strong. Let's see what this one looks like. Yeah, so I felt this one was too strong. You generally don't want it to have too much of these dark areas in there. It's removing too much of the data, and so this is the one that I ended up with. And I think this is pretty clean HA data that we're going to add to the RGB image. And then the next formula after that, I think it's this one, yes. Right, so this is identified in that website, but this is what it's doing. So you're basically putting some of that HA data into the red channel. You're doing nothing to the green channel, and you're doing a little bit. It's like this here, but it's a lot less. And I think what this does is it helps prevent the color from getting a little bit too out of control. I mean, you can tweak this number if you want it, you know, a deeper red or closer to a purple or pink or whatever. So that this is the variable that you would tweak on here. And there is a boost variable here. Now the output of this one is what we're going to call RGB Enhanced. So you take this formula and you actually run it against the RGB image, which is why it's important that you have a balanced color corrected RGB image. You run this against this, it produces a new image, and this is what you get. And this is an example of the starting value here being too high. So you know it's too high when you see lots of HA pixels in the background. You don't want that. That's too much overcast. And you can see here that the HA signal is extremely strong, and you actually can't see much of the RGB image. So you can see I went through a process where I tried different values. Each picture is a different boost value. Now again, this is where it kind of comes to personal taste, right? Some people like the really strong signal. It's almost like, would you like some broadband data with your HA? But my goal is to not have the HA so strong that it takes away from the rest of the image. And so this is where I ended up with as far as HA RGB goes. I thought this did a good job of showing those HA regions without fully obscuring the broadband color. And you also notice that in the background we're not seeing any of that HA signal, right, compared to the original one where you can see lots of HA in the background. To me, this is a sign. If you're using this method and you see this much HA signal in your background, to me it's a sign that your boost is too high. Now, under normal circumstances, if you're just trying to do an HA LRGB image, you would also do a variation of this formula. Basically, you'd check this box to use a single RGBK expression, so it'll only use this, and then you apply this to your luminance channel. And what that does is it gives you this structure. It maintains this structure of the nebula in the luminance channel. If you only have this RGB data here with the enhanced by the HA data, and then you add your regular luminance on there, this data will still be, these HA regions will still be there, the color will still be there, but it's going to look a lot softer. It's going to be de-emphasized. compared to what you're seeing here. So if you want to maintain the HA structure, you would apply that. You would use this against the luminance. Now, because I was doing the HA with the O3, I didn't want to do that because I want the O3 structure to be preserved as well. So I held off working on the HA, adding the HA to the luminance, and I proceeded to work with the O3. All right, so here's the source O3 data that I'm working with. I used the same exact formula, I believe. It should be this one here. Yeah. See that? There's the O3, but same exact formula, just subtracting the O3 from the blue. And that gave us this here. Now, I ran through a couple of versions of this as well, right? So this one I think was too dark, and I went with this. So again, that O3 signal is looking really good here. And then is it this one here? Yes. So you can see this is kind of like the inverse of the one that I ran on the HA. So in the red channel, I'm giving it a little bit, boosting the O3 a little bit, because you'll see in these examples the color was off, and I ended up having to tweak this formula beyond what the article talked about. In fact, let's see, this one probably shows it. Oh, and that's the other thing, as opposed to this, right, where green channel, so T, $T, that's $target. This means nothing. When you apply this to the RGB image, it'll do nothing to the green. So it's impacting red and blue, but nothing on the green. Because O3 is in both the green and blue channel, I needed to put some signal into the green channel as well. So what I got out of that was here. Right, so you can see here, this was the first iteration of it, and the colors are definitely not right here, too purple. So I had to modify those values a little bit, and I think, was it this one or this one that I ended up sticking with? Well, I think it was this one, this G2, because this looks like it's a really good balance, right? So this is the RGB, and we are now seeing O3 structure and HA structure. I mean, and that's really what I was after. This is what I wanted, to be able to see the structure from both. I mean, this is really cool. I have to tell you, I'm jealous of any astrophotographers that might be living in the Triangulum galaxy, because they've got so much to shoot at. And plus, they get to take pictures of our galaxy. I'm hoping they got folks out there taking pictures. So yeah, this is kind of what I was after. I think this one here, clearly the O3 is too strong, right? The broadband data is being impacted negatively. But it's still kind of cool seeing that data in there. All right, let's go back to the luminance. Now, what I figured out that kind of resolved the issue I was having with the blur exterminator kind of creating artifacts, trying to run deconvolution against some of those weird background structures, is that it worked better if I ran blur exterminator after removing the stars. So that's what you're seeing here. See how it's nice and clean now compared to compared to what it was before, where you had all this weird structure here. And then I used the same method that I used to enhance the RGB. I used it against Blur Exterminator, and I believe this is the one that I ended up going with. Yeah, so now you can see all the structure of the nebula. Alright, so what sets this method of adding narrowband data to broadband data compared to some of the other methods that are out there is that this method preserves the structure of the HA region. So you're not just simply getting the color, you're getting the structure, which is really what I'm after. Alright, so now from this point forward, my processing got really sloppy, and it's just not going to be practical for me to try to piece through the steps because I took a lot of different paths. This image turned out to be a real challenge. I mean, this was a hard part right here, figuring out how to get the O3 and HA in the broadband data. But the next challenge was finding the right balance with the stars. So what I did after this is I stretched the HA03 RGB data. I stretched the HA03 luminance data separately, then I combined them. Whenever I do that, I run full noise exterminator with here, I'll show you noise exterminator. So and I do this whenever I'm doing any kind of LRGB combination. So I'll apply full denoise against the color image just to remove any color noise, and then I'll apply the luminance to it. Right. So this is after I'll do the noise exterminator before I stretch it. Then I'll stretch it, stretch the luminance, put them together, and then from that point on, it's just playing with curves and whatnot to get them together. This is, I think, where I started at. No, this is the RGB HA03. So this is before having the luminance even added to that. Yeah, I think this is the luminance. So I added these together and I did a bunch of curves work to come to a final image. And then I did some work with the stars. Now the stars were tricky because, let's see, I think this might be one of my earlier initial combinations of getting the stars back in. And this image, now that I'm looking at it, is pretty good. It's entirely possible. I think I ended up with 24 final images as I worked on this, and I kept going back and finding new ways to tweak it. So I definitely hit that point where I was maybe over tweaking it. But the thing with the stars is that there's so many stars in this galaxy that you can see, and the luminance data had way more stars. I'm not going to see it here, but had way more stars in it than just the RGB. I had initially planned to just use RGB stars only, but I wanted to really increase that star density that's in this galaxy, and I decided I needed the luminance stars added to the RGB stars to do that. So there's a lot of variations of this galaxy. I mean, I guess they all kind of look the same, right? Some tunnel vision, suffering from some tunnel vision here. And it doesn't end there because we have more. Yeah, here's a starless. This looks pretty good, actually. I don't know if this was the final starless. I believe I ran the dark structure enhance script. So this one doesn't show it, but the final image, I think, had it. Let's see. Yeah, I can't tell what's going on here, but I mean the dust lanes look pretty good. I guess that's what the 60 plus hours in a Bortle 5 gets you. So yeah, just more. See now here, this one, this has the star density. Yeah, look at how many stars are in this picture. Right, tons of stars in this shot, but it's too bright. is just way too bright. I mean, the core looked like it was blown out. And there's just, looking at this image, like zoomed in like this, there's just way too much white in here. And that's what's telling me, is that it's too bright. I mean, the core on this nebula is very bright, and I mean, you can't see anything in there. So I think this one is not bad, but the core was too bright for my taste. I think this is more pleasing to the eye. It's not as harsh. Right, but here's the problem with this one. Look at that. Right, so we're getting those deconvolution artifacts. So this one I think looks pretty good, as long as you don't pixel peep. And once you start pixel peeping, then it falls apart. Right, so back to the drawing board. Yeah, too bright. That one's definitely too bright. Yeah, can you see a difference in the dust lanes at least? The dust lanes are a little bit darker. I think this last one might have been the one I decided to run with. So many iterations of this. But let's just jump to the final image. And this is it. So I'm still not 100% sold on it. I think the background is too dark. Maybe the contrast is too high. The details on the nebula I think are pretty good. I still feel there's too much white in here, so somewhere along the way I pushed up the brightness too much, and I never quite got that back under control. But this was a lot of work, and so I just didn't want to go back and start over. But that maybe is what'll be needed to improve on this. There's that O3 dominant nebula. I mean, you can see some HA on the fringes. Really cool. Right, got a nice star cluster in there with some nebulosity around there. And how does the star density look? Right, so that's the other thing that I was kind of working on. Star density looks okay, and I'm not seeing too many of those artifacts. I mean, you can kind of see them in there. I mean, these are like individual stars, right? And so when you run deconvolution against these, it bridges, it blurs them into each other, and then you get these weird tube-like structures. But it's just fainter stars in the dust back there. So that's what I was really trying to avoid. So this final image at least accomplishes that. It managed, I think, the star density pretty well, and those deconvolution artifacts. The nebula, I think somewhere along the line I lost it a little bit. I mean, this looks okay, but not great. It's still a little blown out in the core. At least you can see some structure. So I think the structure is overall alright. Dust lanes look pretty good. Yeah, I think it's too bright, and maybe the contrast is too strong, if I'm critiquing myself on this. But anyway, that's it for now. I'm sure I'll come back to it someday and reprocess it, but I'll keep it at this. Alright, so end of the video. As usual, drop a comment in this video and let me know what you think. Have you ever tried shooting HA03 and adding it to LRGB data before? If you've used a different method, what method have you used, and how did it turn out? Do you think I'm nuts for going 66 hours? Although, in fairness, about half of that was narrowband. So, I definitely feel like I hit a point of diminishing returns on the broadband data. I don't know that I was able to, that I would have been able to get more out. I don't know. Maybe there's more stuff on the edges that. Right. I mean, these guys are pretty faint. Look at that. So maybe there's more to be had. Please give this video a thumbs up, as it helps the video out and it helps the channel out. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button so you can see more videos like this. I go through my workflow process. The goal is to show a workflow process for almost every image that I shoot, that I share out, and of course you'll get gear reviews and things like that as well. Alright, so pleasant evening everyone, clear skies.